Of all the punishments that stained the Middle Ages with fear, few were as iconic or as haunting as death by hanging. It wasn't just a method of execution. It was a ritual, repeated for centuries across kingdoms and empires. For the Anglo-Saxons, it was the ultimate sentence, swift, public, and final. And while the world around them changed, the hangman's rope never truly disappeared from justice. It became part of Europe's dark inheritance. One of the most chilling reminders of this ancient practice lies not in a book or a record, but in the quiet depths of a Danish bog. There, archaeologists uncovered the Talon man. His face astonishingly intact, his expression calm, almost peaceful. Around his neck, the noose still rested. It wasn't the execution of a criminal. It was something older, stranger, a sacred sacrifice perhaps offered to unseen gods. Even the Vikings, fierce and proud, sometimes hanged their captives in honor of Odin, the god who once sacrificed himself upon the world tree, Yggdrasil. But what do you think, was hanging truly a punishment, or could it have carried a deeper spiritual meaning in those ancient minds? And tell me, where in the world are you watching from as we journey through this shadowed piece of history? The Anglo-Saxons are believed to have introduced hanging to Britain as early as the 5th century. Yet when William the Conqueror seized the English throne in 1066, he made a curious decree. Only those who poached the royal deer were to be hanged. All other criminals, he ordered, were to be punished through mutilation, blinded or castrated. It wasn't until the reign of Henry I, in the early 1100s, that hanging returned as a widespread sentence for various crimes. By the heart of the Middle Ages, the right to hang was no longer exclusive to kings and manorial lords. Every town and abbey could claim its own gallows, or gala, as they were once called, and these grim structures became an almost ordinary sight across Britain. Church authorities often held power over who lived and who died on these gallows. In the 11th century, for instance, King William I granted the abbot of Battle Abbey in Sussex the divine power to decide matters of life and death. The abbot could spare a condemned soul if mercy moved him to do so, but this sacred authority sometimes bred conflict. In the 13th century, the abbot of Peterborough clashed with the Bishop of Lincoln after daring to erect his own gallows and execute a thief. The bishop protested furiously, claiming that only he had been granted such privilege by Henry III. Yet, his outrage had less to do with justice and more with greed, for the possessions of the executed man, which rightfully would have fallen into the bishop's hands, were now lost to him. In today's video, we continue our deep dive into medieval punishments, exploring the dark history of hanging and gibbeting. During the 13th century, under the reign of King Edward I, a wave of persecution swept through England. In one chilling episode, 280 Jews were hanged for the crime of clipping coins, the practice of shaving small amounts of silver or gold from coins to melt and reuse as bullion. This act of defrauding the crown was considered high treason, punishable only by death. Some executions took an even more disturbing turn. Instead of being hanged by the neck, victims were strung up upside down, suspended by their legs. This twisted method became infamously known as the Jewish punishment. The Marranos, Jews of Spain and Portugal who had converted to Christianity, whether by force or choice, but secretly clung to their old faith, were among the victims of this horror. During the Purge of 1449 in Spain, several Jewish men and women were hanged by their feet in public squares. German chronicles of the time describe in grim detail how victims were dragged to the gallows between two rabid dogs, bound by their legs, and left inverted to die, a grotesque spectacle performed between the dogs, as they called it. Some were left hanging for hours as a cruel form of torture, others until death finally released them. Across northern Europe, from the 13th to the 17th centuries, this inverted execution appeared again and again, each case more barbaric than the last. King Edward I, known for his ruthless disregard for human life, was no stranger to cruel punishment. During one visit to Exeter, he ordered the hanging of both the town's mayor and the Southgate porter after a cathedral official, Walter Leckdale, was murdered and the killer escaped. The men's only crime was failing to secure the town gates at night, yet their negligence cost them their lives. Decades later, King Henry VIII would prove equally merciless. During his 37-year reign, he abolished the right of feudal lords to maintain private armies, fearing rebellion. In doing so, he unleashed a campaign of executions that claimed the lives of roughly 72,000 people, many hanged as warnings against disobedience. Among those condemned as vagabonds were war veterans, men who had once fought with honor at Agincourt, Bosworth, and Towton. For the nobility, Henry reserved the privilege of beheading. For the common man, there was only the rope. Death by hanging was rarely swift in those centuries. Depending on the method, strangulation could take several agonizing minutes. Sometimes the neck bones would snap. Other times, the condemned would slowly suffocate, eyes bulging, legs kicking desperately for air. It wasn't until 1872 that a calculated long drop method was introduced, a more humane approach ensuring the neck broke instantly. Yet even then, errors by unskilled hangmen could lead to accidental decapitations, shocking the spectators who came to witness justice served. Ideally, the drop would sever the spine, blood pressure would collapse, and unconsciousness would follow within seconds. But such precision was unheard of in the medieval world. Back then, the gallows were primitive, often nothing more than a sturdy tree branch. The condemned might be hoisted up by ropes, or made to stand on a stool or cart that was suddenly kicked away. Sometimes a horse was used, pulling the rope tight until the body lifted off the ground. Other times, a rope was looped over the branch, wrapped around the prisoner's neck while he sat astride a horse. When the animal was led away, the man was left dangling helplessly, feet twitching, face darkening, air slowly fading from his lungs. There was no calculated drop, no instant death, only the cruel grip of strangulation. The human neck was never meant to bear the full weight of the body, yet in the Middle Ages it was forced to do exactly that. The tightening of the rope around the neck was a slow and dreadful science. As the noose constricted, it choked off the flow of blood through the carotid arteries, the vital channels that feed the brain. Starved of oxygen, the brain began to swell until the pressure blocked the top of the spinal column. The vagus nerve, crushed beneath the tension, triggered a fatal reflex that stopped the heart cold. Meanwhile, the trachea collapsed under the strain, cutting off the final breath of life. Death by hanging was rarely quick. Strangulation could drag on for several excruciating minutes, sometimes 5, sometimes 20, as the body twisted violently in the air. Witnesses often described the dreadful scene as a grotesque, involuntary dance of death, the condemned writhing, twitching, and jerking in silent agony while suspended between heaven and earth. Early gallows were crude constructions. A single crossbeam lashed atop 2 upright posts. Almost every town had one, even the smallest of villages, typically placed just beyond the edge of civilization, where justice met the horizon. The condemned were paraded there for all to see, marched through the streets on foot, on horseback, or seated in an open cart so that no one could ignore their fate. The message was simple: fear is the best lawman. At the scaffold, the noose was slipped around the neck, and with grim ceremony, the sentence was carried out. The execution site was usually chosen on high ground, allowing the crowd a clear view of the spectacle, a public warning that the law's reach was absolute. Gibbeting, the final humiliation. The term gibbet has been used for almost any device of execution, whether the block, the guillotine, or the gallows itself. But more precisely, it referred to a towering framework where the bodies of criminals, dead or dying, were left hanging in plain view, a grim warning to all who passed. In some cases, the gibbet served as the instrument of death itself. The condemned might be left there to perish slowly, from thirst, exposure, or starvation. Their final suffering stretched across days. This cruel display, often called hanging in chains, ensured that the punishment did not end with death. The body, smeared with tar to resist decay, would remain on public display until it blackened, rotted, and fell apart. piece by piece, over weeks, months, or even years. When drawing and quartering was the chosen punishment, the dismembered remains of the executed were frequently sent to different corners of the realm. Each severed limb could be gibbeted in a separate town, a gruesome announcement of royal justice. After the peasants' revolt, King Richard II issued chilling orders that bodies be hung in chains far from the gallows on which they had died, there to remain so long as one piece may stick to another. In later years, gibbets evolved into iron cages shaped like the human form, cruel sculptures that imprisoned corpses for generations to witness. To see this form of punishment in full practice, we must step slightly beyond the medieval period to 1537, during the reign of Henry VIII. Two men would meet their fate in chains: Sir Robert Constable and Robert Aske, both leaders of a northern rebellion known as the Pilgrimage of Grace. This uprising had been born from outrage, a protest against Henry's break from the Catholic Church and the destruction of England's monasteries. The king's ruthless chief minister, Thomas Cromwell, oversaw these dissolutions, earning the hatred of thousands who saw their world collapsing under royal decree. Sir Robert Constable, a distinguished Tudor knight who had once fought for Henry VII at Blackheath, joined forces with Robert Aske, a lawyer turned revolutionary. Alongside Lord Darcy, they led a powerful movement across the north, restoring monks and nuns to their sacred houses and forcing the crown to negotiate. The Duke of Norfolk offered the rebels pardon and the promise of a northern parliament in York. Encouraged by these guarantees, the rebels laid down their arms. But the king's word was empty. Within months, Aske, Darcy, Constable, and others were seized and accused of treason, charged with conspiring to deprive His Majesty of his dignity and rightful title as Supreme Head of the Church of England. Dozens met the same fate. For priors, 6 priests, 7 abbots, and 19 monks, all executed in the wake of betrayal. As a nobleman, Lord Darcy received the mercy of beheading on Tower Hill. His estates were confiscated, and his head displayed on London Bridge. But Constable and Aske, both Yorkshiremen, were granted no such leniency. Constable was hanged in chains above Beverley Gate in Hull, his body suspended high over the coast. The Duke of Norfolk, who personally witnessed the execution, wrote chillingly, "On Friday, being market day at Hull, Sir Robert Constable suffered, and doth hang above the highest gate of the town, so trimmed in chains that I think his bones will hang there this 100th year." 6 days later, Robert Aske met the same end outside Clifford's Tower in York, the great stone keep of York Castle. Those condemned to hang in chains didn't perish swiftly. Their deaths were long, cruel, and deliberate. Suspended from iron cages, they were left to the mercy of the wind, the rain, and the unblinking gaze of the crows. Some clung to life for days, their voices fading into hoarse whispers before silence took hold. Their bodies, blackened by weather and time, became grim ornaments on the skyline, a silent, swaying reminder to all who passed: defy the crown, and your punishment will outlive you. And yet, amid such horror, people gathered, not in fear but fascination. Public executions were more than justice. They were spectacle. Families brought food, merchants sold trinkets, and children sat on their fathers' shoulders as human suffering turned into communal entertainment. Beneath the gallows, morality blurred. Death became theater, and cruelty became culture. Imagine standing there, feeling the crowd's murmur fade as the trapdoor opened. Would you cheer, or would you look away? That is the unsettling question history forces us to face. Were these people monsters, or simply reflections of a darker part of human nature that still lingers today? If you're drawn to uncovering the shadowed truths behind humanity's past, the rituals, the punishments, and the strange beauty in its brutality, then you're in the right place. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe to Vassal Truths. Here, every story we tell isn't just history. It's a mirror to the world we've built and the darkness we still carry within.